Well, welcome back, everyone, to this edition of Leading Through Unprecedented Times. I'm Tom Murray, your host, and I am absolutely fired up today to bring you the one and only Dr. David Law. David, how are you, my friend? It is good to see you.
One and only, probably, but it's great to be with you. It was fun to have you here in Minnetonka, and it's great to be with you talking about leading through unprecedented times. I love it.
I am so excited for folks to be able to either listen in or watch online and see and get a glimpse of just some of the brilliance that is happening, the empowerment of your community that's happening there in Minnetonka. And so talk a little bit, if you would, for our listeners that may not be familiar with your community. Just tell us a little bit about your schools, and as the superintendent, just a quick overview of the district itself.
Sure. Minnetonka, a lot of people might remember Tonka trucks. That's a certain vintage of people. Or Minnetonka moccasins, businesses that kind of came out of here. We are a community about 20 miles west of Minneapolis on a beautiful, great big lake that probably at the turn of the 1900s was a resort town you would take a train to, and now is a second tier suburb of Minneapolis. And we are a district of about 11,000 students. Minnesota has a system where parents can choose to go wherever they want, and we're fortunate that we have 40% of our 11,000 students are families that live in other communities and choose to come to Minnetonka. And we're committed to serving all of our community and everyone who chooses to come here at the highest level with excellence. And so, people ask me, I've been here 2 years, what have you learned since you've been here? The things that stick out are just an incredibly supportive community and a willingness to innovate. Sometimes in public education, people are reluctant to change. This is a community that thrives on the innovation that we've been able to provide.
I love that. And, Minnetonka has been on my personal radar for a long time, and seeing some of those innovative pieces that I want to dive into. But when you say that 40% of your student population lives outside the district and elects to come there, you're obviously doing something really, really well when you're attractive to folks. And I know in my personal belief, when you're hard set on your core mission and core vision of a child-centered excellence, and I've heard you talk about excellence and how you live and how you lead and how you learn. So let's dive into that and where that comes from and what that looks like in day-to-day action.
AAS is our National Superintendents Organization, and a few years ago they led with that live well, lead well, learn well. And I love that, because if we're not taking care of the people in education, the other stuff's not going to happen. And so excellence in how we live is that anchored belief that we've got to take care of how our staff and how our students are experiencing our system. For us, that's ensuring that everyone feels like they belong in our school system when we're overt, and you're never done with that work. We're always asking our students and our parents, is this your school system too? And then we're adjusting to meet their needs, because people change throughout the year. And our response should be, you still belong here. You're still welcome here. That's a core focus. Underneath that, we're very fortunate to be working with the JED Foundation on some mental health processes at the high school, suicide prevention. Our kids are carrying anxiety. We're committed to limiting that anxiety and responding to it and connecting them to resources. That all falls in that how we live. And I'll tell you, it isn't just students. You and I have talked about this. It's staff. We got to take care of the employees in our system. For me as a leader, I believe if you're not having fun at work, people can tell. If you're a teacher, if you're a principal, if you're a custodian, if you're not treated like you're welcome, and if you don't get some chances to have fun, people notice that. So we work hard as a system to laugh, to connect, to celebrate together. That's all part of the process. We're in the end of the year, we're in the celebration window, and I get to spend my weeks going out and recognizing people who've been with us 5, 10, 15 years, or people that have earned special recognition. They've been nominated for their child-centered excellence at elementary school or community education. That's about taking care of the people in our system too.
Well, speaking of celebrations, I also want to give you a shot because it was a shout out because it wasn't all that long ago that I was sending you a message saying congratulations to you, my friend, for being named AASA's, I believe, president elect and representing superintendents all across the country. So congratulations on that, and a shout out to our partners at AASA. We work with them regularly, so congratulations and very well deserved. And David, having seen your leadership firsthand and already in just the first few minutes, the focus that you have on the human side, recognizing people first and seeing people first is really a testament to your leadership and so many of the incredible things happening in Minnetonka. And so just kudos to you and to your leadership and how you value that and share that. And it's evident in all that you do. But I love that motto going back to excellence in how you live, lead, and learn. And so I want to dive into the learning piece a little bit because one of the things that I've heard you talk about and have been adamant about is really around experiential learning. Not something that's just done to students, not just something we're not just talking at students and they're going to regurgitate what we shared and call that learning. You're all about the experience. And I know there's some really incredible things that are happening in Minnetonka that are true experiences that meet the needs of students, but also prepare them for the world of work and what opportunities may lay ahead. So talk to us a little bit about your belief in really experiential learning and what that might look like in some programs you have.
Well, I'm going to give a very recent example. Last week, I've been spending some time visiting. Our program is called Vantage. That's career and experiential learning pathways, and they're partnered courses, whether it be an advanced placement course compared with like global business, where students are covering two topics over a 2-hour period. They learn some concepts about what it is to have international trade. And then they dive into some projects that touch international trade. And it's about relevance. But I'm sitting in class and this young man comes up next to me. And I'm not going to tell you what he was designing because I think he can patent it. But he said, "Hey, Mr. Law, I have this great idea for an app." And I said, "Well, tell me about it." And he talked through the process. And I will tell you, the light bulbs went on. He's on to something. And I said, "Well, where did that come up with?" And he had, through some of the opportunities we'd given him, got enough background, took a real life problem that our high school students are facing, and developed an app for it. Now, what public education should be is empowering students to dream a little bit and chase them. If every student, think of that kid's confidence. Like, he loves what he's doing so much, he came to the superintendent, sat in the back of the classroom and said, "This is what I'm doing, and I'm proud of it, and you should hear about it. And so we're going to meet." Experiential learning is matching skills and content with passion. And ideally, lighting that spark that the fire starts to burn, and it'll burn when they're not here anymore. And when we're doing it right, when it's personalized, and it isn't just content in a classroom that they'll forget when they walk away, it's life-changing education. And that's our goal. I'm not going to say that happens for 11,000 students every day, but our goal is that they all have that chance. And so our experiential learning partners students with an adult who's in that field where they can talk about the content, the application, and how people are living those in their careers. So I'm mentoring a student in public policy. We meet once a month. He is working on fascinating projects. One of his is recycling the plastic covers that people store their boats on in the winter to be more environmentally friendly. He cares about it. We process with it on a monthly basis. He's meeting with local boat dealers. He's meeting with our elected officials on what statutes we could write to make that a better process. And scientists and people and common people on the street about how do we solve this problem. Like I'm meeting with him again next week. I can't wait to see what he's done in the last month. And for me, that's the epitome of student-centered, personalized, experiential. Now he has other classes. He'll try to blend, but when we're hitting that sweet spot where kids get to take something, "Hey, I'm really interested in this," and there's careers out of that. He's made connections with adults, 20 adults that he can come back to in 3 or 4 years and say, "Hey, remember when I was working on that project? Now I'd like to work with you." And portfolio building, portfolios those students have. Hundreds of our students are in those programs. They take, and what I just met with an aide to the governor of Minnesota is a Minnetonka graduate who she's a poli-sci major out of college that's pretty well respected. And she came back and she said, I get to work with the governor to design policy for education. I got this passion in Minnetonka. So it was that pay it forward. And then, of course, I said, you should come back and speak on this.
Fortunately, you can say, you know a guy, right? You know somebody we can make this work, right?
But
Oh, man.
that's why I know it's not just in our classrooms here, because it extends to a college, and then it extended to the governor's office.
Yeah. Well, when I hear you as a superintendent, just in passing, talk about a student that you're mentoring and knowing that that's replicated over and over and over and over again. But as a superintendent saying, this one student, I mean, that speaks again to your leadership and really practicing what you preach on the mentoring pieces. And I know that that's something that happens throughout Minnetonka. Two of the other programs that I'd love, because the more that I get to learn Minnetonka, the more intrigued I am and the more blown away I am about the things that are happening. I know you all just launched like an air and space pathway, and there you are, so close to a major Delta hub and connecting to communities and resources. But I also recognize this isn't just about high-tech pathways and the latest and greatest. And you're doing a lot of that great stuff, which is amazing. But then you've also got dynamic theater programs that maybe kids aren't touching devices at all, but are really about the arts. And so dive into and you can pick a different pathway if you want, or a different program, I should say. But you've just launched some based on need and community and resources and projections of the world of work and all those pieces. But they're not all high tech and the latest and greatest. It's also the people side, right?
Right. So what we have in our Momentum program, which is experiential learning in the trades. And I met with a group of students who visited two of the biggest auto sales and repair shops in the Twin Cities area. And they met with owners, and then they toured a dozen different aspects of that organization, from auto detailing to repairing cars, selling cars, all of those parts. And then the dealership said to these kids, we're really not attracting the next generation of employees. Help us design a tool to get into schools to explain all the fields that are in cars and automotive. And so these students were pitching ideas to each other about how they're going to sell this career field, not car repair, this career field, to their colleagues, and listening to them talk about it. And one of the students said, like, I didn't even want to take this class. I only took it because I didn't want to take this other class. And I have found my home. I know I'm going to do this. And he's in a very unique strand of that field, but that's what we want. We want high school to be a chance. Many years ago, I worked with at-risk students, and I went in with a mindset as a college student teaching math in a high school. If I do a job well, all these kids will want to go to college and maybe be a math teacher. And boy, was I wrong. Because if I did the job well, all these kids would have a dream that would give them a happy life. And that shift happened over a few years working with those kids. But what I learned is, I've seen them over the last 25 years, is they bump into me as they're pumping gas on the other side of the stall and say, hey, Mr. Law, guess what I'm doing now? And I'll say, what are you doing, Tom? You'll never believe it. I own my own store. And I said, of course I believe it. You were always in charge. You were always commanding the group of people around you, normally with a funny story that wasn't part of my lesson, but you were always the guy that was directing. That's what we want. Entrepreneurs, people that believe in themselves, have the skill sets. So, we have that, like you said, whether it be in our career pathways or our college pathways, we strive for students to have a chance to experience excellence, whether it be in a spelling bee where we sent some kids to the National Spelling Bee, or the math tournament, or mountain biking, or archery, or theater. We want kids to be able to experience what is it to be in a very excellent environment to hone my skills.
Yeah, I love that. And you just mentioned the word entrepreneurial. One of the things that I know I've heard you share is also like allowing students to muddle through it, and I think you've modeled that in the things you've already talked about, with students that are willing to take a risk, willing to try something different, willing to solve a real world problem. The relevance there is so prominent, but also the ability to allow kids to really muddle through things, kind of fail in a safe environment, try again, fail again in a safe environment, and try again. And all of a sudden, wow, look at the brilliance that just happened. And so you're doing that with such intention and such purpose. So I'd ask you to share a little bit about, I love when you talk about that, allowing students to fail forward and muddle through it and all those pieces. Because to me, it's the foundation of so much what you're doing. And that whole real entrepreneurial spirit is a way that I would kind of pair with that you've already almost mentioned. So question, just love to for you to elaborate on that a little bit.
Well, I think one of the misconceptions is that successful people were successful every step of the way. And you and I both know, and you've met leaders across the country, successful people have brushed themselves off after some stumbles, right? The road to success is filled with hard work and failure. And when we in our experiential learning programs, like those students that were working in the automotive career, I saw them early in the fall when they had just got the assignment and they came back and they were a little bit glazed over about we don't know where to start. And so I was a guest speaker in the class and they said, where do we start? And I said, all of you have different understandings. I have a different understanding than you. Where I might start is different than you. I would start to think about, well, what would the end product look like? And what would I need to know to do that? And I said, and you'll have different steps to get there. And then they get in their clusters. And depending on when you visit with those students, there's the frustrating period, like when I meet with my mentor, and their presentation has a whole bunch of different slide formats, and some people cover the same thing, and there's big gaps. And then I mentored a student last year too. And then I saw the final product, and I'm like, wow, he took some of my input, but they really pulled it together too. From that is the confidence. You've sort of have to be uncomfortable not knowing what the final product will look like. And, we're in a world where everyone thinks that we should have the right answer, but in the reality, we're all just learning from the steps we take to get a little bit better.
I love that. And I'm over here taking notes to some of the brilliance that you're spreading left and right. Absolutely love it. I want to build on the last thing that you said, because here you are as a recognized leader of leaders, in your role with AASA that's going to be coming up, and as an experienced superintendent. This is not your first rodeo. You've been going out this a long time. Would love for you. You shared and the reason I ask is you shared a few minutes ago a lesson that you learned on as that math teacher, thinking originally like, I'm creating all math teachers. That's what I wanted to go to do. I'd love for you to reflect on a leadership lesson learned as your thinking has maybe changed or evolved over something over time, because, and part of the reason I asked that is obviously with the leadership turnover of superintendents pre-COVID, it was about 3.5 years. Post-COVID, it looks like it's under 3 years. Lots of new principals in the field. And so we've got a lot of new leaders that are, going to continue to forge the way. What's an area or a lesson you've learned or a way that you've kind of shifted your thinking from early on in your leadership journey to where you are and the things that you're sharing today?
Well, I'll tell you the strength of teaching, and you were a teacher too. I'll go back. My first splash, as it were, in teaching was teaching kids how to swim. And I was a swimmer my whole life. And they'd get in the water, and I'd watch the flailing they were doing. And in my head, I was thinking, well, that doesn't look like it feels when I swim. How do I translate what I'm seeing to what I need to see? And then I'd swim a little bit and be like, okay, Tom, here's what's wrong. Tuck your chin. That's going to lift your hips up. Teaching and leading is a little bit of explaining how is it that I'm doing it. And so one of my lessons as a teacher, and again as a leader, as a principal, and now as a superintendent, is I pick up when I have that person say, hey, I need to get my internship hours, I need 40 hours or I need 120 hours, I always try to help those people out, because what I'm really doing is teaching. As we're talking, I'm learning. They ask questions that I might not have asked myself. And they say, why are you doing this? And then I'll ask myself, why is that the approach I've taken? And that's a constant learning. Like we will never arrive. As long as we're trying, we will never get to the station because we're constantly learning. And the other tip I'd have for leaders is the humility to process with someone. And I have the benefit of dozens of good friends that I can talk to in leadership, that we call each other. Um, and every once in a while, I just want a second opinion on, hey, here's what happened in my system. Here's what I think I'm going to do. Convince me otherwise. And when you're a new leader, I think you're so afraid to let people know, I'm not sure of myself. Now, I don't go on social media and say, hey, I'm really walking blind here. But I do talk to my colleagues and say, I've got a couple different options. And then we bounce back and forth. And oftentimes I'm solidifying the path I've taken. But that's a lesson I've learned, that
Yeah.
great leadership happens in collaboration with communication and an informed team. And when people tell you, I'm not sure why we're doing this, they're typically saying it because they're not sure why we're doing it. And that means we've got some communication to do. And there's a lot of people who stop with, well, I already told you. Tom, I told you once. If you can't remember, shame on you. Enjoy it. We're doing it anyway. That builds animosity and a lack of buy-in.
Mm.
So we own that. We haven't done our best work if you don't believe that this is the right path.
Yeah.
And that's cross fields work.
Yeah, there's such power in the four words of "I need your help," right?
Yeah.
And my buddy Jimmy Casas shares that all the time, and it makes me think. And but sometimes as leaders, as superintendents or principals, like you said, people look at us and early on feeling like we have to have every answer. That's why they hired us. That's why they put us there. And in the same sense, when we goof something up, owning it, picking up the pieces and being like, all right, let's move this forward. Right. And I think that helps get to one of the last questions I want to ask you is around creating cultures that are human focused, right? That people
Yeah.
want to be. And, again, having seen you firsthand with your people, with some of your teachers, with your incredible team across the board and your amazing admin team that are there, you are such an advocate for teacher empowerment, but I would take it a step forward just for leadership empower every person across the board in your organization. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about empowering your people. Maybe it's your teachers or support staff, whoever that might be. Because one of the things I truly respect about your leadership and in your district is the ability for people to innovate, to iterate, to try new things, to fail forward. But it comes from a leader like you saying, we want you to do these things. And so talk to us a little about how you empower your people.
Well, there's a couple steps in that process, and I'll try to touch on them. I think if you don't have some pretty clear goals on what you need to focus on, you can't empower people. Because if people are wondering what should I be working on, they're not pouring their heart into it. And so you've got to spend some time intentionally, well ahead of the start of the school year, saying what are the most important things, and then let people be in charge. Assign tasks to people to say you are working on this project. And I learned from a former leader, don't complain about someone's performance if you haven't told them what you want them to do and given them the tools to do it. More often than not, it's one of the two things that you haven't done that they're not doing well. Rarely is it them. So when you talk about empowerment, it's clear goals, frequent check-ins, those types of things. I try to praise a lot. I if I go a week and don't acknowledge that I've made mistakes, it's a bad week, because I want people to feel comfortable saying, one of my lines is, as smart as I am today. And some people say, well, that's not very smart. They're probably right. But one of the things I'm trying to say is I'm going to learn more and then I'll do different. So do the best with what you know today for our kids. And when we talk with our teachers over and over and over again, I talk with our teachers and say, I want you to love your job. I want you to go in class with your passion and inspire kids to do great things. One of my favorite years as a principal a dozen years ago was I talked with our teachers and they said, I don't want to do the clubs that we offer. And then I said, Tom, what club do you want to do? And one of my choir teachers said, I'd love to have a single gender choir of boys because they're squeaky like frogs. And if you put them in with other people, they don't sing. Give me a group of sixth grade boys and let me put them together before school. I said, well, what's stopping you? And she said, I can. And she ran. She was alive. Her kids sang better in class. She reached out to me well after she retired to talk about that group and how much fun she had. Sometimes we try to put people in the boxes that we think would fit in school and not their passion, whether it be, that adult that loves training hunting dogs. There's probably a bunch of kids at school that would love that skill, and that person is alive. And then they are alive all day long as kids come check in with them and say, hey, what's the dog learning today, or whatever that is. We have to be open to the strengths our teachers bring to us, because then they'll be coming to our schools alive. And that goes across our system. That's a way to empower our teachers and have fun with our teachers and be humble.
Yeah, I love that. I love your focus. You've also referenced fun multiple times, and people want to have fun. That's human nature. They want to be a part of something, that belonging that you referenced earlier. So I almost don't want to ask this last question, but I'm going to, because you've offered such incredible advice throughout that if I say, what's a piece of advice, you've been dropping advice left and right, which has been amazing. But I love to end with that question. I want to process really what's on your heart right now for school and district leaders across the country, at a time where everything's so political and the challenges and the realities that we face. They listen to a podcast episode like this and they hear about all the incredible things happening in Minnetonka. Maybe they're not sure where to start or how to get started. What's something that you have on your heart right now, or a piece of advice that you have for school and district leaders, no matter where they are in the continuum, no matter where that they lead? What would you share?
Our schools are filled with kids who really want to be liked, who want to be challenged, who want to be complimented, who want to be celebrated. Sometimes they want you to work a little bit harder to connect with them, but they're full of those kids. And our staff are energized by seeing kids thrive. It's the perfect climate for success. We could talk about all the reasons that that's hard, but at the end of the day, the path forward is the hope we have. Our schools are full of the best kids parents have to send us. And we have the opportunity to help those kids have a great day. And for many, many of our kids, they do almost every day. And so when we talk about the hope and when I drive into work and what keeps me going is a very simple example. I was in a classroom yesterday morning and kids were all drawing giraffes. And I said, well, what's going on in here? Which is kind of what I say when I walk into an elementary classroom, because kids will tell you, well, do you know the book Giraffes Can't Dance? I said, no, but I can relate. And they said, well, we're drawing a picture of the giraffe because he can't dance. And proudly, there were 3 different creatures. 2 of them I would have given a giraffe to. The other one, maybe a cat. But they were having a great time. And in that moment, I'm reminded about the simple business we do of lighting little fires under kids and getting them going. That's our hope. For people across the country that carry the yoke of the politics in the community, the anxiety that we're facing, our schools are filled with kids that we can connect with and we can grow with.
And that right there is a perfect way to drop the mic and wrap up this episode. It's Dr. David Law, everyone. David, thank you so much, my friend, for your time.
Great. Awesome. Thanks, Tom.